one.
Thank
So
you.
in 3, 2.
Good afternoon. My name is Rod McMillian. I now call to order the October 17, 2023 meeting of the Audit Committee of the Board of Education of Baltimore County. In accordance with Board Policy 8311, the chair of a committee, at the discretion and after consultation with the staff liaison, may convene an in-person committee meeting. Otherwise, all committee meetings will be held electronically. Today's Audit Committee meeting is being held virtually and broadcast through Microsoft Teams. To conduct this meeting efficiently, all voting items this afternoon will be done by roll call vote. Board members will say their name before making and seconding a motion as applicable, as well as when requesting discussion on an agenda item. As a courtesy to the committee, I ask that you inform Ms. Jamison or Ms. Barr if you must leave the meeting before using the Teams chat feature. I ask that you inform Ms. Jamison or Ms. Barr if you must leave the call by using the team chat feature so that a quorum can be maintained. Ms. Jamison, please call the roll to determine the presence of a quorum of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. McMillian. I will start with Ms. Lichter,
Yes.
Ms. Frempong,
Present.
Mr. Young,
Present.
Mr. McMillian.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. A quorum being present, we'll begin. Ms. Jamison, please call the roll of staff members participating in today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. McMillian. I will start with Ms. Barr,
Present.
Ms. Stevens,
Present.
Ms. Manna,
Present.
Mr. Fletcher,
Present.
Mr. Straight,
Present.
Ms. Sample,
Here.
Ms. Crew,
Present.
Mr. Edwards,
Present.
Ms. Smith, Mr. Hartlove,
Present.
Mr. McCall,
Present.
Mr. Augusto,
Present.
Mr. Oladapo.
Present.
Are there any other attendees present that I did not recognize? Hearing no additional names, I turn the meeting back to you, Mr. McMillian.
Thank you, Ms. Jamison. Good afternoon. Opening remarks. If committee members have questions that are outside the scope of the reports presented this afternoon, please email Ms. Barr or me with your questions. We will follow up with appropriate individuals to get answers to your questions. Approval of minutes. Due to technical challenges at the September 19, 2023 Audit Committee meeting, we need to approve the presented written minutes, which were provided to committee members for review. Are there any corrections to the committee's written minutes of September 19, 2023? Hearing none, the written minutes for September 19, 2023 stand approved as presented. Ms. Barr, please proceed with the FY23 overpayment of separate employees report.
Thank you and good afternoon. As a result of a recent investigation, the Office of Internal Audit determined that individuals were overpaid for extended periods of time in the gross total amount of $87,053.84. Due to the concerns identified in this investigation, we performed this audit to determine the extent of additional potential overpayments to separated employees. Our objective was to determine the extent, number, and overpayment amounts to separated employees by bargaining unit for the period January 1, 2020 through March 15, 2023. As a result, we reviewed 4,662 individuals and determined that separated employees in each bargaining unit were overpaid. There were 174 separated employees who were overpaid a total gross amount of $736,568.34 for the period January 1, 2020 through March 15, 2023. The amount of gross overpayments identified from both our original investigation and this audit total $823,622.18. It's important to note that BCPS received repayments from 8 individuals that totaled approximately $52,000 as of the date the audit concluded. These overpayments occurred due to the lack of proper internal controls over various existing human resource processes. There were 82 related to that. Payroll processes, 7 instances related to that, and the cyber attack, 85 related to that. In summary, procedural gaps exist related to the lack of documented standard operating procedures. Knowledge gaps existed when key employees left or transferred from human resources. There was ineffective communication between human resources, the schools, offices, and employees. There was ineffective or no training related to HR expectations regarding resignations, retirements, and termination. And the hourly timekeeping system, Kronos, has been inactivated since the cyber attack. And the cyber attack also caused some employee separation dates to be removed from the HR system, causing them to receive payments until the separation date could be re-entered. If these issues are not corrected, the potential risks to BCPS include, but are not limited to, reputational risk, undue financial liability, continued erroneous payments, and continued opportunity for fraudulent activity. Our full report, which will be posted to Board Docs and on our website tomorrow, contains 3 overall recommendations for the Division of Human Resources and BCPS. They are: develop and implement internal controls to prevent or reduce further erroneous payments to individuals, recover erroneous payments, and determine additional loss related to non-salary expenses. Management did provide responses to our recommendations, and we have incorporated their responses into the full report. This afternoon, Mr. McCall, Mr. Hartlove, and Mr. Agosto are here this afternoon to discuss the corrective measures that have occurred, as well as those that are planned to occur. And I will now turn it over to Mr. McCall to begin to lead the management's response. Mr. McCall.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Barr. First of all, I want to say that we are here because of what was uncovered by a former employee who used to work in human resources, is no longer with us. And due to that, of course, going back 2 years plus from internal audit investigation, these issues were uncovered. I'd like to say that, of course, with Mr. Hartlove, Mr. Augusto, on behalf of myself, we've been working diligently to correct these issues, and of course, putting actions in place to correct them. First of all, with the 174 employees out of 4,000 plus that were discovered, 169 of them were termed. We worked collaboratively with payroll as well as IT to terminate those individuals. There were 169 that were terminated. 5, of course, that were active in some capacity with BCPS, so they were reemployed and were able to continue their employment with us. But 169 were termed immediately, so that the erroneous payments were not continued for those individuals. In addition to that, we mentioned about the resignation and retirement processes. Information was disseminated to the chiefs as well as supervisors and their staff, as well as information went out to principals in terms of what the resignation, the proper processes for the resignation and retirement process is. As was mentioned, there are a number of new supervisors or principals in place that may not have known what the process was, and of course individuals would not know what the resignation and retirement process is. We wanted to make sure that we got the information out, so that information was disseminated across Team BCPS. As it relates to the no-call, no-show process, once again, we had individuals who are within the system, probably were new to their roles, may not know what the proper process was for the no-call, no-show process. Of course, we did schedule a number of trainings. I believe 9 or 10 trainings actually is starting from August 25th. And we have another one that's coming up here on the 20th. All have been designed to explain what that no-call, no-show process is, how to follow it, and what to do when an individual is not reporting to work. That has been scheduled for our central office staff as well as our principals. When it comes to our termination recommendations, individuals who are recommended for termination are immediately placed into what we call Temp 990. Once we receive that recommendation for termination here in Human Resources, we immediately place that person into the Temp 990 status, and what that does is prevent any further payments for those individuals. It is, as you probably would agree, easier to actually go back and pay someone as opposed to paying them and then trying to go back and recoup those funds. What was mentioned earlier in terms of the automations or at least systems not interacting with one another. When it comes to the personal action form or the PAF form, we have actually worked with our various offices, particularly on the business services side for the operations, maintenance and logistics. They're currently using what's called the Smart Sheet. That information is then created from their office, from their office to Human Resources, and then once here, we're able to make the correct personal action to either separate the individual or to make whatever changes to the record. That information is then communicated then to payroll and also to IT. Construction Improvement is ready to use the form, and we're of course scheduled to meet with them on Thursday to review their processes. Transportation is also ready to use. And then of course at Food Nutrition, we are currently working with them also, and we have a meeting scheduled with them on this coming Tuesday. Moving forward, one of the things, of course, until we have the ERP system in place, some of those are some of the actions that we've taken in Human Resources specifically, but also, as you can tell, we're cross-divisional with this work. We're also working with IT and then payroll as well to implement. I believe Mr. Gusto will speak a little bit more to this a little bit about developing what was a broken system with the BMIS. Some of you are probably familiar with the business management information system we had previously prior to the ransomware attack. Being able to create payroll rosters for all of our schools and then also for our offices. I believe you'll be talking about that being able to go into place this coming November. To then, this is just an extra measure, if you will, to also identify those individuals on each of the schools rosters, and then also in our offices on for those individuals who are active on their payroll and those who may not be active on their payroll. And that way, that information is communicated to payroll and also to Human Resources, so that we know that these individuals would not necessarily should be on their payroll, and those who should be and therefore should be getting paid. So that is an extra step beyond what we've already done with the personal action forms, as well as our communication with the team BCPS, regardless of whether or not it's a retirement, resignation process, or the no-call, no-show process. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hartlove.
Sure. And first, I want to acknowledge that when we first learned of the overpayments, we got together pretty quickly afterwards, and the first thing we did was we tried to put things in place that would stop any future overpayments that were happening at that point in time. We also looked to move to collecting the dollars that were overpaid. And so far to date, we've collected approximately $100,000 from approximately 30 people. Some of the folks are working through a repayment plan, so we're collecting dollars over time from those those folks. But it has been a team effort through human resources, payroll, and DOI. IT. So the collections are ongoing. We have also engaged a collection agency, and we are working on getting an update from them on progress that they have made. So in the short term, we wanted to stop any further overpayments, put controls in place that would keep that from happening going forward. And then in the longer term, solution that we're putting in place is the replacement of our time and attendance system to an automated system, and our ERP system, which are both have internal controls built into them that would keep things from this. You never want to say never. There's always a way to happen, but the internal controls make it much more difficult to have these types of problems, as well as you also can tend to find out if there is an overpayment. You find out much quicker when you have systems with the internal controls built in. The other thing is timeliness. It's much easier to, if you are to overpay an employee, it's much easier to get back dollars that exist from a current employee, because you can inform them, and then you can work out a plan to either take it out of the next pay or out of the next few pays. So that's what we do, and that's fairly straightforward. When someone's a former employee, becomes a little bit more difficult, and that's when you have to get into collecting money, and that's what we're trying to avoid going forward, is any kind of delay. First, we don't want to have any overpayments, but then if we do have an unfortunate overpayment, we want to be able to kick that into play very quickly. So we're dealing with hopefully most of the time we would be dealing with an existing employee, which would be much easier to deal with. As far as just a few of the details of the things that we've put in place, we've restored some reports that were lost in the cyber attack that have helped, reports that if we reviewing them in a timely fashion would identify overpayments prior to them happening. So we're working with HR on that. We've also, as I said, I've already said this, that we've already begun the collection process for those who are overpaid. So I think at that point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Augusto to talk about the details of the two exciting systems we have that we're working on.
Great, thank you. And as Mr. McCall and Mr. Hartlove mentioned, we have implemented short-term controls, automations using Smartsheet as the tool that we use throughout the district for reporting and other capture of data with built-in workflows. So that was a good tool. We put that in place now. That's going to be our short-term control. The long-term control, which Mr. Hartlove mentioned, is the Oracle Cloud ERP solution. We've made HR and payroll the priority, so those are the first two going out of the gate. We're tentatively expecting to have it rolled out beginning in January of 2025. And as we mentioned, we do have stopgaps in place to mitigate the risk and liability to BCPS. In terms of the payroll roster report that Mr. McCall mentioned, that is an active task right now. We are scheduled to have that completed by mid-November, so we're looking at about a month. We'll have those reports ready to allow supervisors to see their staff who've been assigned the rosters. And then Kronos, I believe, as Mr. Hartlove mentioned, the Kronos, we are piloting that system. It was scheduled to go in first half of this school year, 2023-2024, in pilot mode, with then a full implementation following that. So, Mr. Hartlove, if you have a specific date for pilot. You might want to add that here, but I know that's coming in the short-term horizon here for beginning of the pilot.
Yes, we are piloting, I believe in the November, December with a limited number of schools, and then with a more wider rollout, not a complete rollout, but a more wider rollout in January, beginning of January of 2024.
Great. All right, those are all of the IT components to address any of the items that were in the audit report.
Gentlemen, thank you. Committee members, any questions?
Hi, this is board member Frimpong. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Gusto, Mr. McCall, and Mr. Hartlove for the updates. Mr. Hartlove, I have a question about the amount. You were saying at this point that we collected $100K from 30 individuals. Is that $100K actually money collected or money that is promised to be collected? Because you were saying some of the individuals are working out payment plans.
Yes, that's a very good question. 70 has been collected. We have another 40 that's in the process of we've collected some of that, but we haven't collected it all. So I said about approximately 100,000. I think the 40 that's in place, some of that has been collected as well. So I'd have to dive into it a little bit more, but that's the breakdown. 70 has been fully paid back, and then the other 40 folks are in some they've paid a portion and are still have some remaining payments to make.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
I'm sorry, one last thing. That's pre-collection agency. That was just what we've done internally with our sending letters. We also like I said, we've engaged in a collection agency that will be getting some feedback from them hopefully soon.
Ms. Lichter, any questions?
Ms. Rampong had mine, but just to clarify, when you had said that there are employees or former employees making repayment plans, that's the 40,000 you're referring to, right, Mr. Hartlove?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then so we don't know yet how much the collection agency will recoup on our behalf yet. We don't have that number, correct?
We don't have. We're very early in that process, so
Okay.
yes, that's what we're working on.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Young, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Augusto, you mentioned the HR and payroll systems are going to be the first ones we implement. I just wanted to confirm that you said that the planned implementation date for that is January 2025 or for the ERP as a whole?
No, for the HR payroll components is January 2025. The full implementation, excuse me, full implementation is tentatively scheduled for July of 2025.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple. Anybody else? Mr. McCall, you mentioned it was 184, total. Was that correct?
There were 174 that were actually total that were uncovered by internal audit, and 169 were actually termed immediately.
Okay.
After we checked, and then there were 5 that actually were re-employed in some capacity. So of course their records remained active regardless of what position they held. They stayed active, but the 169 were immediately terminated. Yes, sir.
Okay. And out of that 169, were they all separated, or were there any people that went through the interview process, were offered jobs, didn't take the jobs, but somehow got paid? Anybody like that?
Not to my recollection. They were actually in some capacity in some bargaining unit. That was, yes, because each person was in part of a bargaining unit, whether or not it was very few in TAPCO, but some were ESPBC and ASME.
Okay, thank you. And would each of you speak to the timeline that you have established to implement the correction action plan for your particular group?
So that's a loaded question, but at the same time, for each one, there are different parts or components. We've done, like, for instance, as I mentioned before, the process of the absence measure with the no call, no show. We've actually gone through and we've sent out communication to each of the offices as well as to principals and schools to let them know these are the times for our for the presentation, for them to understand because I think part of it was processes, right? For them to understand the process of no call, no show, what to do with those individuals if they don't come to work. Also for the termination, resignations, and retirements. That has also been communicated as well. So that has been that's been completed in terms of getting the word out, where to find the resignation form, what are the proper steps to retire from the system. So that part has been completed. As Mr. Gusso said, we're working collaboratively with IT also regarding the payroll forms. That is one thing that will be completed in, we said, mid-November. That is another part of the process that we are working jointly with. So the PAFs, those, as I mentioned, the various groups over in facilities and logistics, maintenance, those areas, we've been working with them on the PAF implementation with the smart sheet. So that it's been in process. Some have already been working with the smart sheet. We're implementing those in, I would say, by the end of October. That process should be completed.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Pedro.
No, I was just going to add, so there are a couple of components that IT is actively working on. And as Mr. McCall did mention, so it is a collaborative effort. We all may have a little piece, so IT will implement and develop their pieces that will then be turned over to Mr. McCall's area for implementation. But the two remaining, as he mentioned, is the roster report, which is due mid-November, the ERP implementation, which is underway now, with the HR component and payroll component targeted for the January 2025 timeframe. And as Mr. Hartlove mentioned, the UKG Kronos implementation, which is being done in collaboration with the vendor and a third-party project manager, that is scheduled to go into pilot in the November timeframe, with the implementation rollout across the board beginning in the January timeframe.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the big thing is we've kicked off obviously our ERP implementation and our UKG Ready implementation. So those we've all been working on, and we've put quite a bit of staff towards that. The internal controls that we've put in place, the report that lists the status of inactive, that lists employees with status of inactive, that has been restored already. The collection process has begun and is ongoing. We did work with legal early on to learn. We wanted to know how far we could go with trying to collect dollars, and we've gone through all that. So we've also looked at collection of the non-salary items. As we get dollars back, we also then have to go back and collect the taxes and FICA and those types of things. So we've also begun that. So everything is either being worked on actively or has started. So we're pretty far along. The collection process, it won't become, I don't know that it will at some point we'll have to say we've collected everything we can collect, and there'll be some process to go beyond that. But right now we're still actively trying to collect the dollars.
Gentlemen, thank you. Ms. Frimpong has an additional question, and then I'm going to come back for a question from Ms. Barr. So thank you from me. Ms. Frimpong.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. My question is at the collection agency. This is Board Member Frimpong.
Yes.
About the collection agency is, I guess, how much did we decide, or how was it determined what we would turn over to the collection agency? And then is there going to be a, of course, they're going to take a fee or what have you. So how much, I guess if you could kind of just give an approximate, are we looking at, we say we turned over 100,000 to them to collect, and then if they take a third, we're really recovering 67,000. But what is kind of that plan or that layout for the collection agency for the amount of money they're collecting?
Sure. Well, what I've talked about so far, those are dollars that we collected on our own. So we collected 100, it was 100%. We don't have any fee to pay because we collected that via letters out to folks. What we've done on the collection agency is, first we wanted to check with our legal office to make sure that it was okay to do that. And we found that we've used collection agencies in the past for other items. So we've engaged the collection agency that we've worked with in the past. We turned all of that over to them for an evaluation of, I believe what they have to do is they have to look at these and determine how collectible they believe they are to give us a rate. They have not given us the rate yet. We're waiting. We're waiting on getting that update from them. But we did provide that all the information to them. They'll evaluate the outstanding amounts, determine what they think they can collect, and then based upon that, they will give us a fee, and then they will move forward and begin to collect. But we're going to have to coordinate with them because some folks may just just be sending it to us based upon our letter, versus other folks who have not responded to our letter but will respond to the agency. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you. Ms. Lichter has another question, please.
Yes, first to comment that it's very apparent that the three divisions have to work really closely with this correction action plan. We can hear from all of you. So first, thanks for the pieces that you're taking care of individually and the fact that you are working so closely together to ensure that we collect the money and that the controls are in place. What is the progress monitoring going to look like? So how are, you've got you talked about short-term controls and long-term controls and a lot of moving parts. So how are you continuing to monitor the progress that the action plan will take place?
Well, I think there's two parts of this. There's the most important part to us at this point is trying to make sure that this does not happen in any kind of large scale manner again. I never want to sit here and say it could never happen again. Those are too strong words, but we want to make it so if there are any overpayments, they're picked up very quickly. First, that we limit, that we really don't, our goal is not to have any, but if we do have an overpayment, that we learn about it very quickly and keep those amounts to a minimum. That's something that we are in the process of working on, but really that's something that we need to do. We want to do right away to keep this from going any further. We believe we've put a lot of those internal controls in place. The systems will really be very helpful there. So I think the goal would be, and I think part of that will be the internal audit group probably coming back and looking at us again in some period of time to see how things look. As far as the collections, our goal is to collect all the dollars, but we're realistic. We're going to collect as much as we can, there's going to be a point where we're going to, at some date, we're going to have to say, okay, the collections are starting to we've kind of gotten as much as we feel like we can get reasonably, and then the cost of getting more to collecting more. At some point, the collection agency basically is going to say it's too much work for too little money, so we will have to write those dollars off.
Thank you.
And then Ms. Lichter, I'll just add on the IT side, the modifications, the deliverables that we have are actually fall under the purview of our ERP governance committee. So we do have a cross-divisional governance committee that tracks creation of work, prioritization of work that DOIT does, and we track schedules, implementation timelines, estimated timelines. So that's presented there, of which we do have representation from HR. So any dates that we communicate are there, and that makes its way into the overall action plan that Mr. McCall is tracking right now.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And the other piece is too, we are still not only just doing the one shot, we presented to each of the offices in the schools. We'll also do quarterly updates to the offices and schools as reminders or refreshers, if you will, of this is what the process is. And of course, you may be new to your job, but at the same time, we want to, repetition is the student's glue. So we want to make sure that they understand the process moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young has another question.
Yes. Mr. McCall, I'm going to use principals as an example because you talked about new principals and not being familiar with like the no call, no show process. The principal being, you know, the prime within that building, and of course we have other groups, but is that training being limited to just that prime, like the principal, or is it being provided to, you know, an AP or an admin secretary and just, you know, expanding this out to, you know, the other groups, you know, maybe a supervisor in a garage? Is the prime, you know, is that the only person getting the training?
So that's a very good point. As a matter of fact, that is something we can definitely look into to have at least not the assistant principal. It could be the principal and his or her designee. So if they couldn't make the training, then they could certainly designate another person, but we can expand that to to other individuals who are in that supervisory level. So a very good point.
Okay.
Thank
you. Mr. Hartlove, I know you talked about the collection agency and having a meeting with them and determining a fee, or them determining a fee. Are they being asked to try to collect the whole amount, or are they, you know, authorized to basically cut some kind of deal that says, okay, you give us half, we'll call it good? Or that's yet to be determined?
That's a to be determined. Obviously, any dollar that we receive is $1 more than we have. So we are open to, you know, having those discussions. You know, I don't want to, say too much about, that, but we're going to try to collect as much as we can. But if they have creative ideas that make this that get us dollars back that we wouldn't otherwise get, we are certainly open to that.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, and I want to say thank you very much to all three of you for the cooperation that you've given the internal office of auditors, because I know that it's critical. Without your cooperation, they can't do their job. They need you to help, figure this out to a point. So thank you very much. I have two questions for Ms. Barr, and then I'm going to ask the committee members if there's any other questions, and we'll move on from this topic. So Ms. Barr, I'm curious about how you came up with the number of 4,000 and some to actually look at initially and then you found 174 out of that. Why that number? What kind of percentage did you use there?
I'm going to ask Ms. Jamison to reply to that question because she's more familiar with the details of the work. Mr. McMillian, sure. If it's okay. Thank you.
Yes. Sure. Hi, Ms. Jamison here. We got a report from HRIS on all individuals who separated from BCPS during that time period, January 1st, 2020 to March 15th, 2023. It so happened that there was 4,772 of them. So that's what we based it on.
Okay, great. Now that makes it simple as far as focusing on those people that had separated during that time frame. Okay, and Ms. Barr, what is your plan as far, can you share with us and the viewing public, at what point in time do you plan to go back and analyze if this correction action plan, if these different departments have implemented what they said they're going to implement in a timely manner, and whether you do another investigation or you do a test or whatever to determine if this has stopped? When are you going to proceed forward with that?
So typically what we do is we look at the dates that are included in management's response related to the corrective action. We go back to the auditee to see if those dates are still okay, if they've met those dates, or if they need to extend those dates, and within reason, we'll allow that to happen. So, for example, you know, we're here in January 2025, July 2025. Well, it doesn't make sense for us to really look at anything related to that right now, but some of the other things that have already occurred or have already taken place, we can certainly look into and compare that back to the corrective action to make sure that that has truly been implemented. So what we'll do is we'll work with Mr. McCall, Mr. Hartlove, and Mr. Agosto to figure out when we're going to conduct our follow-up, but it will be sometime within this school year.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee members, any additional questions? This is your last opportunity on live TV. Anybody? Okay, and one final thank you, Ms. Barr. I want to thank you and your entire department for whatever, you know, contributions. I know you have a lot of different reports going on. There might be some people in your department that had more of a major influence on this report than others, but I want to thank your entire department. I want to thank you, and I want to thank all the gentlemen involved. And you know, this is a serious topic, and I'm glad that we've faced it, and that the report comes out tomorrow, and then we'll deal with any questions at that point. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to another topic. Thank you, gentlemen, for attending.
Thank you.
Ms. Barr, please proceed with the FY24 Q1 work plan update.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McMillian. So in FY24, we identified 35 projects as of September 30th, and our first quarter runs July 1, 2023 through September 30, 2023. Of those 35 projects, 19 have not yet been started. We have made a determination to defer the Title I and Title II project because they've recently been audited multiple times and they've had no findings related to that. So at this time, they're considered very low risk, and because of those results, it doesn't make sense for us to look at that right now. We have 4 projects in the preliminary information gathering stage. That is the extended suspension and expulsion project, the school safety measure program, the oversight of the cloud environment and SaaS applications, and the bus contractor management project. And then we have 6 that are in various stages of field work. We have the advanced academics eligibility, the PIA request process, which is actually finished now, the CTE accreditation, special education dispute resolution, construction change orders, and the food service financial review. So those are the 6 that are in some stage of progress in field work. We have 2 projects that are in the review stage at September 30th. Programs and services provided to prevent and mitigate health barriers to learning, and the Carroll Manor Elementary School School Activity Fund and Procurement Card Audit. We had 2 in the reporting stage. You heard about the overpayment of separated employees that will be released tomorrow. And then we have another report that will be discussed in our closed meeting related to IT security, the closed portion of this meeting. And then we issued 1 report at September 30, and that was the use of facilities, which was presented at our meeting in September. I also wanted to call attention to the committee that Board Policy 8400 now requires us to provide quarterly summaries of significant audit issues and an update of corrective measures taken related to prior audit issues and recommendations to the board and the superintendent. So we had 34 findings identified in 10 of the FY23 audits that we completed. We determined that 6 of the findings were verified, and we closed those to indicate that management successfully implemented their corrective action noted in the final audit report. In 9 instances, management completed its corrective action. However, we now need to complete a follow-up to verify that this action was implemented. And in the remaining 19 instances, management either requested additional time to complete its corrective action in 7 instances, and 12 where the action completed deadline is still sometime in the future. So this report is actually posted to our website, and it's also available in board docs. But in summary, that is what we've completed in Q1. So I am now open to any questions related to this FY24 Q1 report.
Excuse me, committee members, any questions of Ms. Barr? Hearing no questions. Ms. Barr, I accidentally skipped over the first item of new business, so I'm going to go back and pick that up, and then we'll move forward after that. Please proceed with the MSDE BCPS ELA audit.
Okay. Yes, so we were asked to determine the status of the audit completed by MSDE related to ELA, and we determined that an audit was not completed by MSDE. And additionally, we found out that on Monday, April 4, 2022, the MSDE Office of the Deputy State Superintendent, Office of Teaching and Learning notified BCPS via email that the curriculum for Baltimore County Public Schools was scheduled to be vetted by the MSDE during the 21-22 school year under Code of Maryland Regulations 13A.04.12.02 Program in Mathematics and 13A.04.14.02 Program in English Language Arts Literacy, which requires each school system to submit evidence that English Language Arts, ELA, and mathematics curricula align with Maryland College and Career Ready standards. Evidence can be demonstrated through vetting reports or ratings from a nationally recognized third party or through a review of the curriculum by the Maryland State Department of Education. However, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future requires a review of current Maryland College and Career Ready standards, which could impact the curriculum vetting process. As a result, curriculum vetting will be postponed until the review of Maryland College and Career Ready standards is completed. So essentially, an audit was not completed by MSDE. They postponed the audit, but in the meantime, BCPS moved forward with identifying a new elementary ELA curriculum to make sure that it's aligned with the science of reading, the Maryland College and Career Readiness standards, and was evidence-based. And there is an RFI for secondary ELA curriculum that was in the spring of 2023 as well. That concludes my report.
Ms. Barr, thank you for sharing with our viewing public. Committee members, any questions about this to Ms. Barr?
This is board member from Song. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, I apologize because my question is actually, my reception is going in and out and I'm missing some pieces. And my question, I think, was actually related to the previous, and that was for the first quarter fiscal year 24. Is that what Ms. Barr just reviewed as far as the number of cases, et cetera?
Okay.
Okay. So my question is, are the guidelines really laid out for what is supposed to be, or clearly laid out for what's supposed to be reported to the hotline or the Office of Internal Audits? Because for the 27 cases that were received, it said that 17 were not in the purview of the hotline. So that's about 63%. And so I guess I'm just questioning, how are these guidelines, or how is this information clearly laid out as far as what is or is not to be reported? Because also, what does that impact on the time and resources that's spent for investigating or looking into things that are not in the purview of the Office of Internal Audit? So it's not to dissuade the reporting, but just should we have, maybe, should they be directed to, you know, other offices or agencies for those type of reports that are coming in.
Okay, you did jump ahead. We haven't done the investigation report yet, Ms. Frempong.
Oh, okay.
That's
So I'll
okay.
wait.
That's okay. No, but we can handle the question now. Keith, do you want to take it, or you want me to reply? You're on mute, Keith.
Thank you. Sure, I can take it. And Ms. Frempong, as when I go through and do the investigation update, if I didn't answer everything now, please stop me at the end of that, and we can certainly address it there as well. But to address your main question about what should be and what should not be, when individuals go to the website, the web page for the Ethics Point Fraud, Waste, and Abuse Hotline, that landing page actually gives very specific I don't want to say directions, but instructions as to what should be reported. That's why we asked the reporter to kind of classify that information for us, whether it be a misuse of resources or a payroll fraud, or the different categories that we have. In addition, we also have resources there to inform the reporters that if you're reaching out to us to report this, you actually need to dial this number or call this number here, a different area of BCPS, things like that. So we try and direct them as much as possible. However, at the end of the day, obviously, the individual is going to do as they wish. Now, I can tell you that when individuals call into the hotline, instead of going in through the web-based portal, I know that they don't get that level of information. They don't see that. They'll actually speak to someone who will just take whatever information they have and essentially transcribe that. I know in the past we have given presentations to our audit committees, to our audit committee members, to kind of show you what that looks like. I know we can certainly schedule something like that in the future if that's something that the committee would like to see.
And also, just to add on to what Mr. Fletcher reported, we do have what we call a triage process. So we're pretty well versed in knowing what types of reports we keep in internal audit and that we investigate, and those are those related to fraud, waste, and abuse, and those that we refer out to management. And I'm not going to steal Mr. Fletcher's thunder, and maybe it's okay to just go ahead into the report because he does have some statistics to show just how much we keep in our office versus how much actually is referred out to management or externally or appropriate agencies. So, Mr. McMillan, if you don't mind, it might be a good idea to go ahead with the investigation report.
I want to accept full responsibility for this lack of organization on my part. You know, looking at a couple different screens, I skipped over the MSDE ELA audit, and I accept full responsibility for that. To be honest, I would like to, it appeared that Ms. Lichter possibly had a question related to that. If she did, I'd like to close that out before we go on to Mr. Fletcher.
No,
Ms.
I'm good.
You have a
I'm
question?
good, thank you. No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Young? Okay, so no questions. Excuse me?
No, I said I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So no further questions. I have one from Ms. Barr. No further questions on the MSDE BCPS ELA audit. Ms. Barr, you said this, but I just want to make sure that the listening public understands that BCPS did not postpone that audit. The MSDE made the decision to do that.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher, please proceed with the FY24 Q1 investigations update.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. And Mr. Corns, I apologize. Are you able to share that document, or is that one that I would pull up and share?
You'll need to pull it up.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so here is our Q1 FY24 report. Looks very familiar. We're going to kind of walk through it, but as Ms. Barr alluded to earlier, we do have some new information that we will be sharing with you in the back of this. So I had to apologize, had to hop over to my proper script here. So this is a report of our year-to-date investigative stats as of the end of the first quarter of 2024. And starting here on page 2, and you'll see here in table 1, it says that through the end of the first quarter, we received a total of 27 new cases. So Ms. Frempong, I believe this is what you were initially discussing at first. And so in this table, we summarize here that 9 of those 27 were kept for an investigation by internal audit. 1 was actually referred to BCPS management for their review and for them to provide a response back to us. And then 17 were closed without investigation, as the information provided was not in the purview of the hotline. And so table 1, also want to point out, shows us that of the 9 cases that were kept for investigation by internal audit, 1 was a falsification of records, 3 were payroll fraud or overtime abuse, and 5 were misuse of property resources. And so kind of back to Ms. Frempong's point, and then also what Ms. Barr was adding, as these cases come in, so 27 cases were received during this first quarter. As they come in, we have a triage process where we go through to determine, okay, is this something that is fraud, waste, and abuse, is something that's appropriate for our office to investigate? If so, it falls into that first category. Or is it something that we already have areas within BCPS that review or investigate things like that? Is it appropriate for us to take that information, forward it to that particular office, and then request a response back? That's our management investigations. Perfect example of that is when we receive information about students or children attending the wrong schools. We have a residency liaison that we're in contact with. We'll send that information to them. They'll conduct their review and investigation and send those results back to us. And so that's the second category. And then that third category are those that we close with a memo to file, where it's not an allegation of fraud, waste, or abuse. It's typically management issues, employment issues, employee issues that as I said, doesn't really fall into that fraud, waste, or abuse framework. But what we still do with that is we will send it to the appropriate level of management so that they know what's coming in through our hotline. The difference is, and the reason why we close it with a memo to file, is that once we send it to that level of management, we're not asking for a response back. And the reason why we don't is that, again, going back, even if they said, yes, this problem exists, we've determined, based upon what the information that we've been provided, that even if there were some truth to whatever allegation or whatever information has been provided to us, it doesn't necessarily violate a superintendent rule or board policy or any of our standard operating policies, standard operating procedures. Wouldn't violate anything in that nature. And so it's really truly that management issue. And so we get it into the hands of the folks that can truly do something with that information. And really more importantly, so that they are aware of it. So that's our first table to talk about what came in quarter 1. And then this is a further breakdown of those cases. And so when we take a look here at table 2, what we notice is that in addition to the 27 new cases received this fiscal year, I'm sorry, the first quarter of this fiscal year, we had 32 cases which were already open as of the end of the previous fiscal year. So we had 59 cases total that were open throughout this quarter so far. And of those 59, 32 have been closed, resulting in 27 that are still open as of the end of the first quarter. So as of September 30th, we still had 32 cases that were still open. And then what we see here is in this first column where we're looking at internal audit investigations, 30 were open throughout the fiscal year so far, and 16 have been closed. And so 14 are still open as of the end of the first quarter. Now, details for all of those cases, all 30, are actually on table 3, which is below on page 4. Now, the next column over talks about our management investigations. And what we see here is that 8 were open so far throughout this fiscal year. And as of September 30th, 3 have been closed. and that gives us 5 open as of the end of the first quarter. Details for all of those cases are available in Table 4, which is down below on page 5. And then finally, all the way over to the right, we talk about our cases that are outside the purview of the hotline. And 21 of those were open throughout the fiscal year. And as of September 30th, 13 have been closed and 8 remain open. Details for all of those cases are on Table 5, which is down below on page 6. And so here we see Table 3, just discussed a minute ago. This is all of the investigations that our office has kept. You'll see what has been closed, and you'll see the substantiation levels, and then you'll see what we still have open. And then down below, these are our reports that we have referred to management. You'll see what we have closed. Again, their substantiation levels, and then here's our 5 that we still have open. And then the same thing for our memo to files for the cases that we have received outside the purview of our hotline. Okay, now moving forward, one of the things that we had talked about a little bit earlier is we are now going to start providing a little bit of data visualization, so that we not only talk about the cases and some of the numbers, we're going to take a look at what that looks like graphically. Provide a little bit of a different aspect of the information that we receive. As we go through and talk about this, at the end, we can certainly have a conversation, but also want to make you aware of the data and the availability of some of the data that we have. And so that if you would like to see some of this data presented in a different way, we can certainly have those conversations. So the first thing we do is we take a look at the incoming cases. And this time what I want to do is break down those cases and talk about the different school zones or the different zones that they've been categorized in. So when we take a look at chart 1 here, taking a look at those incoming cases broken down by zones. Of course, school zones are determined by the Department of School zone chart for this year. And you'll see the abbreviations here. So this is our west, this is our east, this is our central. And then, of course, the CO, that's our central office. And then just to give you a little bit of detail. So, and this will be consistent as we go through. Up top, we're looking solely at our most recent quarter. So this is our first quarter of FY24. And then on the bottom left, we're going to take a look at that same data, but now we're going to look at it for an entire year. So it's 12 months worth of data. And then the chart over on the right, we're actually looking at it over a 3-year span. So 36 months worth of data. And really what we're looking for is not so much what each percentage is or what the actual numbers are. We're looking for trends. We're looking for things that stick out that would not appear normal. And so when we look at just a quarter of data, we see, okay, all the information that came in, all the cases that came in related to the East or schools categorized as East Side schools were all memos to file. So, you know, that may not make you wonder, but it stands out, right? Because they're all the same type. However, once you actually back that data out a little bit, now we're looking at it over a 12-month span and then a 36-month span. You see it kind of plateaus out and relatively across the board, we operate right around that 35 to 40% level of here's what we keep for an investigation. So that blue, that's what our Office of Internal Audit investigates. Anywhere you see the gray, that's going to be what we refer off to management. That's always a very thin sliver. And then the rest, right around that 40 to 50% level, is what we refer out to. I'm sorry, not refer out, but what we close with a memo to file, and then send those case details to management for their review. And so that's when we take a look at things by zone. Then we say, okay, we're going to take that same information, but now I want to see it broken out by types of schools. And so we take same type of data, and now we're going to look at it. Still, we have central office, but now we're going to look at elementary school versus middle school versus high school. Now, we did take some liberties with some of our schools that maybe categorized differently. You had things like the Chatsworth School, things like, we classify that as elementary school. White Oak, we classify that as an elementary school. So we didn't break out those individual ones because it's such a small section, but we dropped them into their appropriate columns here. And again, same type of data. When you look at it from the quarterly aspect, we see what came in over the last quarter, but when you then look at it over a 1 year and a 3 year breakout, it kind of tells us that, yes, we are relatively consistent with what we see in each of the areas. One thing to point out, if you look, so here's a perfect example. We look at the East Side elementary schools over a 1 year period, we see that we're receiving less investigations, but more memo to files in that area. If that continued, or if that projected out, and then we see that over a 3 year period, that might require us to drill a little deeper. But here, at least, it sticks out to us. It makes us say, okay, this may be something we would want to look into in the future. Okay, our third group of data visualization charts. Now we're going to look at pie charts, and we are now looking at the same incoming cases, but now we're looking at them in terms of what they're categorized in terms of fraud versus waste versus abuse. Now, the beauty of that is that we should just have three categories, right? Fraud, waste, or abuse. The reality is there's always going to be a fourth. There's always going to be that other. However, instead of calling it other, we just call it non-fraud, waste, or abuse. And to be perfectly honest, those are typically what you're going to see in the memo to files up above. So up above, we're talking up here in this orange. These are always in that 40 to 60 range, 46%, regardless of whether we're looking at it by types of schools or, again, up here by school zones. We kind of see the same. So this blue chunk of the pie, those are non-fraud, waste, and abuse. And you can see they're kind of in that 40 to 60% range. So that the data itself, it makes sense to us, right? And so what we're doing is, if anything stuck out, we would be able to see that and say, okay, something here is misaligned. We would expect to find some type of explanation. However, this kind of supports that data up above. Then in terms of breakout, you can see actually our first quarter is rather representative of what we look like over the last 3 years. In terms of that orange piece of the pie, that's our abuse. Green is going to be fraud, and then that yellow sliver, that's going to be our waste. And you can see that percentage varies within those groups. Okay, now, and we have two more to go. So our fourth chart is, again, it's another pie chart. This time we are taking a look at reports that we have issued. And so we're going to break them down by what type of report was used or what type of report was issued to close that case. So keep in mind, memo to file, that's the one on the far right up above when we're talking about we gave the case details to management, but we're not asking for a response back. And then the first one, the investigation, that's the ones that our office keeps, and we do our review and investigation. And then the second one, or I'm sorry, the last one, the management referral. I believe I gave the residency example for that. And so we would send those details to management and request a response back. And you can see again here what we would expect to see. That bigger piece of the pie are those cases where we aren't investigating, but we are providing those case details to management. And then our investigative reports, the yellow piece of the pie, in that 30 to 34% rate. And then the little smaller sliver is what we've given off to management for them to review and then provide responses back to us. And then our last visualization is just a look at our substantiation rates. And so really now we're talking about, again, still talking over a 3 year period, and I'm gonna scroll back up here. But keep in mind, when I'm talking about the substantiations, when we have not investigated and referred to management, that when you combine those, that's really what we're giving to management to for their review, but not for them to investigate. So those are our memo to files. So that's one of the things we could probably definitely clean up, make this a little more relative. But when we take a look at substantiations, this is anything that has been investigated, whether it's by us or by management, and reports would have been issued. And so you can see, again, first quarter gives us an idea of what's happened, at least during that first quarter. But then once we pull it out and look at a 1 year versus a 3 year analysis, then we kind of see the consistency over some of the allegations and in terms of what we're able to substantiate versus unsubstantiate. Keep in mind, we also have inconclusive. And so inconclusive, if we haven't discussed before, essentially means that we are unable to either prove or disprove that allegation that has come in. And then partial substantiation, that is part of our 3 year analysis. You can see that's a very small slither. That is something that we have done away with. We no longer partially substantiate anything. We're either able to fully substantiate it or not, essentially by the way we triage. If it's multiple allegations, we break it out into multiple reports. And so we're able to remove that, but until that 3 year span has passed far enough, it'll still be in there. So, Mr. McMillian, I turn it back over to you for any questions. I know I presented a lot of new data and may have talked some folks in circles as we were going through, but I'm open to any questions.
Okay, committee members, any questions to Mr. Fletcher? Mr. Fletcher, I don't see any, I don't hear any. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay. Announcements. The next meeting of the Audit Committee will be on Tuesday, November 14th, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. Closed session. May I have a motion to go into closed session as permitted by the Open Meetings Act as found in the Annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions Article 3-305B15 to discuss cybersecurity if the public body determines that public discussion would constitute a risk to, number one, security assessments or deployments relating to information resources technology, number two, network security information, or number three, deployment or implementation of security personnel, critical infrastructure, or security devices. May I have a motion?
So moved, Frimpong.
Thank you, Ms. Frimpong. Is there a second?
Second, Young.
Mr. Young, thank you very much. May I have a roll call vote?
Ms. Lichter? Ms. Lichter?
There was a message in the chat that she was switching to her phone.
Okay. Ms. Frimpong?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. McMillian?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try Ms. Lichter again. Ms. Lichter? Okay, the favor is 3.
Okay, great. The motion carries. At this time,